Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, welcome back. So, we are going to, in this course, in this particular lecture, we are going to look at a very specific rendering of Dastangoi. As we had been noting in the previous lecture, that the important source today for the Dastangois is the series of the Dastane-Amir-e Hamza, printed by the Nawal Kishore Press. Now, what is interesting about the about this entire printing project is that it was the series of books were published, the volumes were published across 25 years, and what we had was a set of 46 big volumes. Only one such set actually survives today, and each had about 1,000 pages, and they could have many stories within it. So, what happened is, and this kind of story telling, so collection of oral narratives is something that was done at various parts of the world, as well as certainly India. For example, the Grimm's story fairy tales is one example, where these stories were collected from around Germany and other and adjacent areas, and the put to is what we know today is the collection of stories called the Grimm's fairy tales. All right. You also have the Thakumar Jhuli or the repertoire of the grandmother, as one can say, which were collected by someone called Dakshinaranjan Majumdar in Bengal, which collected many oral narratives which were prevalent within Bengal. So, similarly, the Nawal Kishore Press did that for the Dastangoi repertoire of stories, and they were collected, and these 46 huge volumes were created. However, the most interesting, most popular sort of series section of that is the Tilishme Hoshruba, as I said, the enchantment that steals away all the senses, the Tilishme, that magic which takes away one's consciousness almost. And it is these printed tales which survive till today, and becomes a very important source for the contemporary Dastangois, because the Dastangoi tradition actually ebbed away with the coming of print, of films and television, but these were revived. And when they were revived by very importantly artists like Mahmood Farooqi and Danis Hussain and their associates in around 2005, they tried to keep as much of the original form, but they realized that the contemporary audience requires a very different setup. So, if you had noted the previous instances of storytelling were by single storytellers, but the innovation that has been worked out in the modern Dastangoi tradition is that it is told by two storytellers. Very importantly, that allows a certain kind of conversational storytelling that is possible when two characters are interacting among themselves. The two Dastangois can also imitate that. So, it is a very performative form, all right. And very importantly, they have also over the years, they have moved away also from narrating only stories from the Tilishme Hoshruba or the stories of Amir Hamza. They now take on many contemporary stories and stories from other sources. So, one of the sources that they have sort of converted into a Dastangoi is a very important work done by engaged in by Vijayan Dandeta, Padam Shri, and he was also a recipient of many awards, including the Sahitya Academy Award, and he Vijay Dandeta's lifelong activity, lifelong achievement has been collection of many stories from across Rajasthan, and making them available for the contemporary reader, the children, and which gives them a sense of what are the cultures that cultural traditions that they belong to. Very important point about Vijay Deta's way of telling these stories. We had already looked at how when the Novel Kishore Press was putting together the narratives of Amir Hamza, when they are written down, that is when the writers are making their own, bringing in their own inputs and writing it down, which is the case with any oral narrator, any oral storyteller. They would, while telling the story, tell it in their own language, tell it in their own format, bring in their own stories, make their own innovations. But in print, the moment the thing comes, when the story comes into print, it gets a solidity. It seems as if that is the story, but it is only the story, the version of the story which is that of that teller of that particular tale, all right, which in this case is Vijay Deta. So Vijay Deta makes a very important choice when he writes down, notes down these stories. He tells this in the local, he tries to maintain the local Rajasthani language, primarily Marwari, but he tries to include many other Rajasthani languages. And this is a choice because we would understand in today's day and age Rajasthan to be a Hindi speaking state, but what he is trying to do is that Hindi is not one language. Hindi is a collection of many languages which are spoken across India. We are going to study more about Hindi and Hindustani and the history of Urdu later on in the course, but to tell you that you would be aware that the Hindi that is spoken in the eastern part of the country is very different from the Hindi that is spoken in the western part of the country. But print by its very nature, and this is something that we are going to study later on within the course when we study Benedict Anderson, that print brings a certain kind of fixity to the language. But Vijay Deta tries to tell the story as much as possible in within a certain Rajasthani language, principally Marwari, but he calls it Rajasthani, trying to put together, shape a certain Rajasthani cultural tradition within the story. The particular story that we are going to study today, and please watch the video which would be there in the links, of a particular rendering of Dastangoi Chouboli. Dastangoi Chouboli is a set of 4 stories which are again within an overarching framework of a narrative, and we know within this story that there is it is the will or the guile of the Choti Thakarain who goes into Chouboli's house to sort of challenge, to take on the challenge that Chouboli has thrown. So, to tell you the story in a nutshell for the moment, that in this particular narrative there is the Thakur. The Thakur has his wife who is the Thakarain, and one of the things that the Thakur does is to show his prowess on a moonlit night by the light of the moon, by the moonlight. He makes his wife, which is the Badi Thakarain, stand on the terrace of the house and then walks 108 hands away. Hath is the measure that is there, and takes aim of his bow and arrow, and the aim is that the arrow should go through the nose ring of the Thakarain, and it is extremely bewildering for the Thakarain, it is disconcerting for her, and she remains always worried. Now, once one of her relatives who comes to her, and she shares her pain with her, and she says that this is not what a man should do. This if anybody does it, she throws a certain challenge to the Thakur, and the Thakur, when the Badi Thakurain tells this to the Thakur, he says, what, I am going to do the same thing to her, I am going to marry her today. So the Choti Thakurain gets has to get married to the Thakur, and when the Thakur again tries to take aim on the Choti Thakurain, which is his new wife, the Choti Thakurain throws a challenge to her, that there is this Princess Chouboli who has thrown this challenge, that anybody who can break her vow of silence, anybody who is talented enough should break a vow of silence, I will marry that person. And Chouboli is supposed to be very, very beautiful, very attractive. She is supposed to be a famed beauty, and and Thakur, being what he is very, very proud. He is proud of his male prowess. He cannot ignore this challenge that the Choti Thakurain has told to the Thakur, has thrown before the Thakur, really. In fact, he is so clouded by his idea of his prowess that he thinks that this is nothing. But of course, the story this is no kind of a challenge to him. He can easily sort of win the hand of Chouboli, and of course make him his third wife, so to say. And once he goes there, of course he is not able to he is not successful, he is not able to get Chouboli to speak, and as a result, like many other princes who had come to accept Chouboli's challenge, have been thrown into the dungeon, where they are made to grind pulses, grind grains, and that is how they are spending their lives. So, of course, the Choti Thakurain, being a wise woman, she understands what this entire that it was not within the Thakur would not have been able to make, he is not witty enough. It is not merely the physical prowess that is important, but it is your wit, intelligence, which is also important in the world. And the Choti Thakurain then now goes on a mission to actually rescue the Thakur. And what she does is she takes on a male attire, there is cross dressing, she takes on a male attire and goes to Chouboli's palace, and she takes on this challenge, and in the process tells 4 stories, which are a set of 4 riddles, and each time Chouboli speaks, the challenge is that Chouboli should speak 4 times, and each time Chouboli speaks, and when she speaks this 4th time, of course the vow is broken, and Chouboli gets married, is supposed to get married to the Choti Thakurain, which is again a bit of a danger, because a woman getting married to a woman, which is the suspense within the story, which is there, worked into the narrative, and ultimately the Choti Thakurain tells of her secret to Chouboli, and they become friends or sisters, so to say, and the Thakur is freed as a part of a deal, and the story ends there. So that is the story in a nutshell. Now Vijay Dandeta, he puts together all these stories. Some of Vijay Dandeta's stories are very famous. For example, the Bollywood film, the Shah Rukh Khan film Paheli, which is based on one of the stories by Vijay Dandeta. So the Dastangois, they also take on these one particular story from his collection, and that is the Dastangoi and converts it within the Dastangoi form. And what is interesting for us to note here is the way, of course, what we are going to use as a text for this particular lecture is the video that I have shared, which is a performance of Dastangoi, and also the English translation of the Chouboli stories were published in this volume, which is given in the reading list, translated from Rajasthani by Christy Merrill and Kailash Kabir. All right. So, we are going to look take a closer look, and what we are going to look at in this story are these elements, these specific narrative elements, which are traces or features of oral narratives. Okay. Now, what we are going to look at, one is we are going to look at the story, and we are also going to look at the performance, which is accessed through the video. Now, one thing that I must tell you is that when you are looking at the performance, you must understand that the performance is a single instance, right. Not all performances of Chouboli would be exactly the same, that is because performativity is ephemeral, they come and go. Because you have it recorded means that what you are seeing is just that one performance, right. Whereas other performances of the Dastani Chouboli could be very different, because simply the actors could be different, the storytellers could be very different. So, you have to look at the performative elements, but we are also going to access the text through the translation. All right. Now, very important element of any oral form is an invocation of the supernatural. Now, if you look at the video, you find there are two invocations. One is the invocation which is in Persian, and the invocation which is in Urdu, and the other invocation which is seeking the blessings of Lord Ram. The story begins, "May Lord Ram bless us that this tale of Chouboli be reborn again and find new readers in the new listeners in age after age." So this is something that you would find that is inherent within any storytelling tradition, and when oral narratives move into print, it becomes part of the print tradition as well. Famously, those of you who would have read Milton's Paradise Lost, Milton's Paradise Lost is an adaptation of an epic oral form into print, but it begins with an invocation where Milton invokes the heavenly muse in order to so that he is able to tell the stories of God, because he is an ordinary mortal, and this is part of the story. I mean, in any traditional performance form, be it play or be it Nautanki, or it could be a Bharatanatyam performance, there is an invocation of God, there is a prayer, it begins with a prayer, all right, because the idea that the storyteller is performing a certain role, is carrying a certain tradition through him or her, and seeks a certain blessing of external supernatural forces. It is part of the tradition, so it is there in the print as well, it is there in the performance as well, that the storytelling begins with an invocation. The invocation also marks, very importantly, it also marks a sense that now the story actually begins. It prepares the audience to pay attention, that there is something serious is about to happen. Imagine when a film happens, when a film starts, before the film, when you if you go to a movie theater, you find there might be advertisements and others, people are moving around. The moment the credits start rolling, or moment the opening sequence starts of the film, people start settling down, or they should really settle down, and that sort of marks the beginning. It is like opening the page of the book. It marks off that, okay, now we are ready for the performance. So, the invocation marks, it is a ritual which not only the storyteller participates in, but also the audience participates in, and through that they get used to. Just as the way, let us say, when I begin the lecture, I say welcome everybody, it tells you that okay, the lecture has begun. it also tells the recordist that the lecture has begun. So, he knows where to cut, all right. So, that is very important. Invocation is a very important aspect of oral storytelling. Now, you see when this story is being told, there is a very important element with I am going to point out some of the important elements that are there within the story. You have this at the very beginning, that he made her place her feet exactly on the prints. You know, there were a pair of footprints which were painted in Hinglu red, and he made her on the terrace, and he makes the Thakran place her feet exactly on those prints and wait. He would then go to his spot 108 hands away, where he had a pair of footprints painted for himself, place his feet exactly on those footprints and stand ready. Then he pulls back, then he would pull back the bowstring. Notice this, the tense of the sentences. He would pull back. It is in past perfect. This is what he would do, right? So, it is like he continuously does that. It is not one occasion, but in many occasions. So, this is detailed description of what the Thakur does to the Thakran, the exact process. Next time he is going to repeat it, the audience already knows what is the process through which he has gone. He may repeat it, but the storyteller may repeat it, but choose also not to repeat it. The second occasion, or the fifth or the third or the fourth occasion in which the same action happens could be abbreviated. So, oral narratives work with both ways. One is through abbreviation as well as through refrain, through repetition, and both of them interplay with each other, because it becomes a way for the audience to sort of understand or visualize the entire story. Remember, Dastangoi was a tradition where which had a lot of visualization, but after the 19th century the visualization went away. The volumes which Novel Kishore Press also printed did not have images other than maybe on the cover, and certainly the performance that you have referred to did not have any illustrations. So, the visualization in these circumstances for the audience is through the words, the detail, the descriptions that are provided by the narrator. So, he says he made her place her feet exactly on those prints and wait. He would then go on to his spot 108 hands away, where he had a pair of footprints painted for himself, place his feet exactly on those footprints and stand ready. Then he would pull back the bowstring to his ear and let the arrow go whistling through the air towards the Thakurani, straight through her nose ring and whizzing out the other side. With each arrow, the Thakurani could feel her organs doing flips inside. And this is the important point here, to tell the audience how of just emphasize. If the audience, if some member in the audience has in the process just got lost in the description and has not been able to capture exactly what the danger really is, what the risk really is, he says, if he missed his mark even by a hair, there would be nothing separating her from the beyond but the grace of Lord Ram. And this is where the story really begins. And sometimes the Thakuran tried many times to convince her lord to stop, but the routine addicted Thakur was not about to give up his daily practice any which way. He did this every day, every moonlit night he would do it. Each time his reply was the same. It would not be right for a big man to follow a woman's advice, someone who is known, some big as in not in size, but big in status, big in fame. If I am somebody who is big within the whatever social hierarchy, maybe certainly he is a Thakur, so he is from the upper castes, right. So each time his a warrior caste, right. So he is not supposed to follow a woman's advice. You do what you have to do, I do what I have to do. If a big man gave up his daily practice at a woman's say, then he wasn't big at all. So there is this male pride in him that is there, and this becomes the fulcrum of the story really, if we try to analyze this story, because at the end he owes his life to a woman, his other wife, that is the Choti Thakurain, whom he marries in the course of this particular story. So he is unable to challenge Chouboli. He is not able to break Chouboli's vow, despite his great show of bravado, great show of great show of courage or skill. It is all a show. He really is not where it really matters. He is not able to perform, right. So that is the fulcrum, that if a big man gave up his daily practice at a woman's say, then he wasn't big at all. So this is something that that becomes the opening sequence of this particular opening sequence of this particular performance. Now, how does, so any narrative, as you understand, any narrative, when it has to begin, it has to begin with, we know it begins with a certain a beginning, and then it develops, and then it there is a resolution to it, right. So at the beginning you have first of all, we know who the characters are, where the story is placed, some sense of what of exposition or introduction to the story. Then there is a conflict. A conflict has to begin, and the conflict gets more complicated as we move forward. So here you are, there is in the story, there is the character of the Thakur and there is the character of the Thakuran, all right. And here is a case where the Thakuran is troubled by a certain practice of the Thakur, and she is not able to get out of it. That is where the suspense is created, that is where the conflict is created. Can the Thakuran get out of it? But then we come to the next part of the story, where the Choti Thakuran throws this challenge to the Thakur. So now look at the second description, which comes on page 37 of the volume. In the end, the Thakuran had to stand there in the footprints. It was full. It was a full moon night. The moon and all the stars hanging in the sky laughed at her ill luck. Now, I would advise you to go back to the video recording and listen to this particular portion. You see, there is a far greater, far more picturesque description of the moonlit night, right, which was not there in the first part, because this is a particular occasion and a particular moon. The moon is not, doesn't shine the same way every day. This is a different tense, and it is a particular occasion where the Thakuran is actually going to talk about what the Choti Thakuran told her, right. So this is a particular occasion, and there is a particular moon, and therefore there is a particular description. Now this description, which is far more picturesque, in the far more symbolic in the actual in the performance that I am referring to. Now, this description is not something that need come specifically as part of this story. This could be the description of a moonlit night. It could be just a template of the description of a moonlit night, which the storyteller just picks up. Whenever he has to describe a moonlit night, he may in his mind have 2 or 3 descriptions of a moonlit night, and he picks up one of them, the one that he feels most appropriate for the occasion, and puts it in here. There is no written text, it is all there in the mind, everything is embodied, and a better storyteller, the more talented storyteller would be one who would have a greater repertoire of these epithets, greater repertoire of these templates of description, and pick on each of the description at that point of time. So, a far more and therefore, when it is there in print, it will always read the moon and all the stars hanging in the sky laughed at her ill luck. That is the description that we will always read when we read any edition of this printed volume. Whereas, if we if when a person is telling a story, can maybe introduce a few birds there, maybe a river passing by, the description could be varied for different performances. Now, so after this particular occasion, the Thakuran tells, so she used the pretext of telling him what the Set's niece had said, because the Thakuran did not have the courage to answer back to the Thakur. He says, this is what your niece has told me. The niece is the woman who is going to become the Choti Thakuran, one who has told the Thakuran earlier that she would not have allowed the Thakur to treat her like this. He says, this is what your niece said about feeding such a rogue of a husband roasted chickpeas fodder, and that is and serving him water used to clean her feet, sitting astride his back and riding him around the bed 7 times. Now, this is a repetition. This passage keeps on getting repeated within the first few sequences of the story, and it also gets repeated at the end, because this is exactly what the Thakur has to do when he fails to make Chouboli speak, and he goes into the dungeon, and that is where he has to grind the grains and eat them. So, this is so obviously the Choti Thakuran is successful, and these words, so when they are repeated, it has this effect on the audience, because the audience hears it once and then hears it a second time, they can connect the dots, they can remember it better, and it is important that they remember it through the story, because all through the while that the Choti Thakuran is telling stories to Chouboli, there is constantly reference to what is happening in the dungeon, that there are prisoners in the dungeon who are who are grinding grains, and the audience knows that in the dungeon there exists the presence of the Thakur is also there, all right, which nobody else knows, only the Choti Thakuran knows, and the Thakur knows, and the audience knows. So, that difference in level of knowledge is what creates the suspense within the story, all right. Let us move forward. So, a little further down, that we find that there is a particular episode where the Choti Thakuran is not left with any choice as to whether to marry or not. When the Thakur says, I am going to marry my niece, there was no choice. It was not just not in the stars for Thakurs to possess forgiving natures. When the uncle saw that he was not getting anywhere, he said he would ask the girl's parents and see what they said. But the Thakur made it clear that there was no need to ask anyone. It was his wish, and so it be. After all, her parents' village fall under his Thikana. Once royal wishes were made known, nothing else need be considered. This is an aphorism, and oral narratives work on aphorisms. These are givens, and it is a reiteration of the given, and any sort of arrangement that is worked out within the oral these narratives, because these narratives are part of a traditional society which has its very hierarchical set of rules, right, and the oral narratives remind the audience of those rules, that once royal wishes were made known, nothing else would be considered. So, the audience knows that there is no other way, that the niece has to marry the Thakur. but any arrangement that is worked out within this without questioning this larger aphorism. That is very important for us to note, that in this story there is a very important this element of the cross dressing, right, and what we end up is a situation of a possibility of a same sex relationship which could have emerged, because at the end the person who is able to make Chouboli speak 4 times would get married to Chouboli. So, the audience knows that the young man is actually a woman, and so what would happen if that marriage actually happens? It would challenge social norms, gender norms. That remains a certain tension within the story. So, at once it is a challenge to patriarchal norms, but it also succumbs to patriarchal norms at the end, because ultimately the marriage actually does not happen. The marriage happens to the Thakur. I mean, Chouboli gets married to the Thakur and not to the Choti Thakuran, right. Now, let us pay attention to this particular passage. Now, there is this challenge of Chouboli, which is narrated here, which the Choti Thakuran throws. Why is your chest also puffed up over this trifle? You want to just throw arrows at me, and you think that is a matter of great prowess. This is merely a trifle. The real challenge is one that is thrown by Chouboli. You put on a nose ring and stand there, so I can shoot. Why don't you do the reverse? This is very interesting, where the Choti Thakuran says, why don't you do the reverse? You put on a nose ring and stand there, and I can shoot 1,000 arrows through your nose ring easy as a flick of my left wrist. I mean, I can do it as well. What you were doing, I can do it as well. No, to do something truly extraordinary. This is ordinary. Hitting a target with a bow and arrow is a lot of people do that. That is very ordinary. Do something extraordinary. If you want to try something really extraordinary, you would have to win the hand of the Princess Chouboli and bring her home to this fort. 17 times 20 Rajas and lords have scrubbed their faces clean, ready to make Chouboli speak 4 times and wed her. This has been tried. So this is the challenge. This is the challenge that is thrown. This again, the description is detailed. But all of them are sitting in a dungeon grinding fodder for their horses. If you can pull off this feat, it would be something truly remarkable, more impressive than shooting arrows through the nose ring. Now, look at this, there is a linguistic trap here, because the Choti Thakuran, before she got married, she had said that if my husband tried to throw arrows at me, shoot arrows at me, I would make him grind chickpeas and eat the fodder, right. And this is exactly the task which has been set, that if you fail in making Chouboli speak, then you will have to grind the fodder. So, this is a kind of a linguistic trap. The audience would be, because of the description, be able to link the two things and understand the wit, that the fact that the Choti Thakuran has a certain intelligence, a certain wit, and understand the character and what they can expect out of her. But anyway, for the moment we forget about Choti Thakuran, and it is the Thakur who tries to first go and win the hands of Chouboli. On the 3rd day, so the Thakur arrived at the town of the princess. He bathed, got ready, and headed off in the direction of the Rajmahal, and mighty Nagara drums were posted every 100 paces. The Thakur pounded every drum his pass to announce his intentions and presented himself at the royal court. Everywhere in the town, people now knew a new suitor had arrived to marry the princess. Many had beaten these drums before, but none could meet her challenge. The suitor came with faces well scrubbed, ready to, remember the previous passage also talked about the faces well scrubbed, cleaned. So, that is a repetition. Ready to join their hand in marriage, were sitting on their haunches in the dungeon and grinding fodder for the horses of those same hands. There were so many suitors down there, you could find a buyer for a you could not find a buyer for the mound of chickpeas at even half a paisa. All right. So, this is a foreboding, this is a prenomination, this is what is going to happen to the Thakur, this is what may happen to the Thakur if he fails. The moment he enters, so at the moment he is entering with great pride and great show, but the narrative is undercutting it, saying that really is he different from the others, that is the question. All right. So, another all right. So, we now move on to the place where the Choti Thakurain actually dresses up as the suitor and comes in. The handsome young suitor sat down on the carpet before. He looked up into Chouboli's face and began. Says, Chouboli is not going to urge me for she is not going to break the oath of her silence. So, who will give the hunkara for my story? For a story without a hunkara is like a food without salt, and this is something that is repeated in the performance. You can see that these exact lines are repeated as a refrain each of the 4 times, and this is a very interesting structure, that someone has to give the hunkara, someone has to give. The point is there has to be a thirst for the story. The storyteller cannot tell the story unless the audience asks them to tell the story. In fact, if you can think of the teacher as a storyteller, then this is a very interesting instance where there are no students. I mean, I at this point of time when this recording is taking place, I have no awareness as to who the students are going to be. So, this is actually a kahani without a hunkara in a very interesting case. But to return to the Dastane Chouboli, the storytelling tradition depends on this thirst for a story. It is the audience who says, what happens next? Tell the story, tell me another story, Dadaji ek kahani sunao. Without that the story does not happen, right. So, the thirst for the story has to come, and if it does not come from Chouboli, it has to come from something else. It can come from the flame, it can come from Chouboli's necklace, it can come from the smoke. Each particular story has a particular giver of hunkara, and Chouboli gets into an antagonistic position. Chouboli does not want the story to be told, she wants to maintain her vow, she does not want her vow to be tested. This is a trial that she has, right. Now, you see within the first story, and this is something that is going to get repeated in the future stories as well, that within the first story there is this case where this man this student who wants to test out his guru and goes looking for ajubas, and something that is marvelous, and he finds 4 interesting characters there, right. And this is a structure, every time he goes across he sees something marvelous and he picks them up and moves on. So, someone who can see very long distance, someone who can run very fast, someone who can shoot arrows at targets at unimaginable distances, and so someone who can make roads. These are 4 people who are gathered together. Now, there is a structure to it, there is a structure within the structure of the story, overall structure. There is structure of the 4 stories which has been created, this frame where Chouboli will be made to speak 4 times, but within each of the stories there is a certain structure and a structure of repetition. Every time he encounters somebody, he asks, what are you doing, and he gives a very imaginative, very extraordinary answer, and he figures out this is the marvelous person and let me take along. And that structure is returned back at the end when when the task that these 4 people who are being paid a huge sum of money by the Raja has to get, that they each of them perform a certain role in getting that treasure from Khujbuj, which is many course or miles away, right. And each of the stories actually begin, this is another repetitive structure, each of the stories, just like the Vikram Betal story, each of the stories ends with a riddle, and in each particular case the Hunkara giver, which is an inanimate object, gives an answer, and the storyteller, that is Choti Thakurain, gets into a conflict with that person, and that compels the Chouboli to speak, right. And this is a strategy adopted obviously by the Choti Thakurain, because she knows the answer, she is witty, she is the most intelligent person within the particular story, and she carries forward this argument till such time that Chouboli se raha na gaya, Chouboli as if is not able to keep silent. Suddenly the two started arguing with one another. The bed insisted that the path clearer was the most marvelous, and the storyteller insisted that the runner was the most marvelous. Suddenly the syllables exploded from Chouboli's lips as if from a cannon, and she stood up from the bed like a shot struck like lightning. You are worthless, you are a worthless bed. How could you spew such nonsense right before me? And she speaks. But then at the end the answer is pointless, because the storyteller is not interested, the Choti Thakurain is not interested in the answer. He says, who could say anything further, with Chouboli standing there and gnashing her teeth, with the handsome young gentleman who was there. Storyteller placed his hand on the hilt of the sword and announced, beat the drums to glorious beat, and unspeaking Chouboli has deigned once, and the drums beat. This is the structure that keeps on repeating each time, and the audience so it closes the story, just as the invocation begins the story, the exposition begins the story, this sort of repetitive structure sort of ends the story, all right. And then the focus after this goes to those prisoners who are there. All the suitors began splitting their chickpeas 10 times faster in the joyous anticipation of being set free. There is nothing in the world more sacred and more wonderful than freedom, freedom from being Chouboli's slave, that is the structure, and we are ready for the next. Now what happens, and right after that, immediately after this climax, that Chouboli has spoken, and what would happen is that you have a coming down. Now you have a heightened anticipation, the nagaras beating and this anticipation of freedom and everything, but remember, Chouboli has to speak 4 times, not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times, and it has not happened. So, it is a climb down of the climax. So, just as eyes look more alluring outlined in kohl, and a brow looks prettier decorated with a tikri in sindoor red, so is a story better told with a hunkara. Again that we begin to come back to the same point. So, the climax, there is a climb down from the level of suspense, there is a climb down, all right. So, if for a moment you thought that this structure of the beginning, middle and end is very Aristotelian, this is this climb down from the climax is something that is very Aristotelian. By its very nature, all narratives will have many beginnings, because there is a story within a story. It moves to a climax and falls down, moves to a climax and falls down. So, we could retell the story again and say that there is just once, if Chouboli had to speak only once, then the rest of the final part of the narrative could have simply been put there, and it does not matter here which of the 4 narratives, what is the ordering of the 4 narratives, you could actually interchange them. There is no narrative structure within the arrangement of the stories. It is not that one story builds on the other, you could say exchange one with the other, just like the slides of the Kamishibai, all right. And so So, this repetitive structure, return of the repetitive structure after the climaxing of the of one story within a story is a feature of the oral narrative, because the oral narrative is about telling of smaller stories within a larger narrative. The larger narrative becomes an excuse to tell the small story. Now, before I so these are some of the features of oral narratives really, and before I sort of finish this lecture, I would like to focus for a moment on certain aspects which are also in the performative, right, in the performative domain. For example, if you looked at this particular video which I have suggested that you watch, you would find that there is a particular reference to the set as rich, to the description when describing how the set, how rich the set or the merchant is in the third story of this particular set of episodes. He refers to a particular rich person in contemporary India, all right, the name of that person. Obviously, that is not there within the traditional story, it is not there even in the recounted stories by Vijay Nandeta. But it is a way to it is a conversational sort of style, because the storytellers are telling the story to a particular audience, and the audience possibly responds to a certain contemporary detail a whole lot more. And oral storytelling allows us to include that reference, which a printed form may not allow us to, because you cannot adapt your story from time to time. A book once printed will probably have a long life, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, maybe less than that, but it has a longer life, whereas an oral narrative, it has a shorter life. I tell a story, moment everybody walks out of the room, moment the narrative ends, it is over. So, I can afford in an oral narrative to be absolutely, I can refer to something that happened this morning or yesterday, all right. And that kind of referencing is possible within an oral narrative, which is why you would not see that reference to that rich person in the printed version. You will see that reference occurs in the performance itself. Another example of a similar kind, in the final episode, when there is a reference to these 9 lakh coins which are to be distributed. So, and there is a reference to the streets of Bhubaneswar. As you note, this is a particular event. This performance was actually located in, it was happening in Odisha, in Bhubaneswar. And just to open up this conversation, that it is an intimate, you could see it, unlike this particular lecture where the audience is sitting invisible to the speaker, or a film or a television where the audience is not actually seen by the performers, or even the writer of a book. When the writer is writing, the audience is not there, but those images of the Dastangois or the Kathakar speaking is very much there, right in front. They are there. The audience is right in front, right next to, a few hands away, a little bit away from the speaker, from the storyteller. So it is a much more intimate style, and in that intimacy one gets into a conversation, one refers to certain things that the audience would know. It brings the story closer to the audience, right. So these are some of the other examples. Another point that I would like to also refer to is that because we are when we are reading the translation. Of course, the Hindi text is also available. So those of you who can access the text, I would encourage that you actually read the Hindi text. But because this is a pan India transmission, I have referred to the English texts instead. And so in translation, some of the nuances of language are lost. For example, look at this particular reference where one of the women says, the Seth's wives, as Sethani says before he goes to meet the Thakur in the fourth story. She says that how can I do this? मैं सांस भी लेता हूँ तो मेरे सांस को खबर हो जाता है. So I can't go from here because my mother-in-law would get to know, even if I take a breath, my mother-in-law gets to know. Now this play of between the two words of सांस भी लेता हूँ तो मेरे सांस को खबर हो जाता है is a very important aspect of oral transmission. Oral, because it's playing with the sound of the word, not the way the word is spelled. The two words are spelled very differently. So they wouldn't show up similarly in print, certainly not in translation, but the effect in the speaking of it, in the oral version, the sound would be very different. So these are some of the aspects of oral storytelling. I would urge you to read these stories and watch the videos several times to understand the nuances of an oral performance. And also, if I would advise you, please watch more, engage in some performative oral performances. Storytelling is becoming very popular now. There are many more storytelling festivals happening in India. Please go and watch some of these, participate in some of these performances to get a better understanding of what a world without a mechanical reproduction could possibly be. The world before print is something that we need to understand. But all the while, do remember that even though we are watching watching a oral performance today, these oral performances are actually mediated through print. So it is not exactly the way they would have been in the pre-print era, but still it will give you some bit of idea. Thank you.